Hi everybody, and welcome back to Murder at Bedtime. This is a 15 to 20 minute true crime bedtime story. No frills, no waffle, all the gobbledygook is at the end. As always, if you are a returning listener, you know I think you are all awesome. And if you are new here, I hope I can persuade you to stay. And with that, let's get serious and crack on with a murder I've been meaning to do for some time. Please be aware it is a murder of a child, so if this is anything that may trigger you, it's probably better if you give this one a miss on this occasion. Even though I do try to keep the description of the crime to a minimum. So here we go with the Little Red Riding Hood murder. On the afternoon of the 27th of June 1946, 12-year-old Muriel Drinkwater was happily singing along on the Gowerton County School bus home with her friends. At approximately 2:30, when the bus stopped at the mile-long lane up to her family's farm at Tildee in Petlegaya near Swansea in Wales, she waved goodbye to her friends and skipped off the bus, still singing. She then started the approximately 1 mile walk up to her home. Muriel's mother, Margaret, looking out of the kitchen window, saw Muriel when she was about 500 yards from home. She waved to her before she disappeared from sight. Then, because of the dense foliage, she disappeared. When Muriel didn't arrive home, at first Margaret assumed that she had met a friend on the path and they had gone to play. But by tea time, when she still hadn't arrived home, she went to look for her. Not being able to find her, she got word to her husband John, and he and some locals started to search for Muriel. When she couldn't be found that afternoon, the police were informed and a proper search began. The following afternoon, a policeman found Muriel's body 100 yards off the path in a Japanese larch plantation. She had been severely bludgeoned around the head, raped, and then shot twice in the chest. The gun was found lying nearby. It was a modified World War I Colt 45, normally issued to the Canadian Army. But what made it really unusual was someone had added criss-cross patterned perspex covers to each side of the handle. Even after bringing in the bomb squad with metal detectors, the weapon used to hit Muriel so severely around the head was never found. Presumably the gun was discounted as the weapon that did this due to a lack of blood on it. In the days and weeks that followed, police officers visited every farmhouse and cottage in a 150 square mile radius and interviewed some 20,000 men. Now, one of the last people who saw and spoke to Muriel on that path was a 14-year-old Hubert Hoyles, who was on his way back from the farm after buying some eggs from Margaret. Hubert was taken in for questioning, where he said the only person he had seen on the path that day was Muriel, but a few weeks earlier had seen a man he thought was around in his 30s with a local accent, well dressed with thick fluffy hair. He appeared from behind some bushes and asked Hubert what he was doing, and then told him to get going. Now, for quite a while in some people's eyes, Hubert was a suspect. Also a prime suspect to many people was a man called Harold Jones. At just 15 years of age in 1921, Jones viciously murdered 8-year-old Frida Burnell in Abertillery, Wales, after her father sent her to buy birdseed at the shop where Jones worked. Her body was found in a local alley, but her handkerchief was found in the shop. he was arrested and sent for trial at Monmouth Assizes. The locals, believing that he had been framed, called for his release, and at his trial he was found not guilty and was paraded on the shoulders of the crowd through the town. He was even awarded a gold watch. Days later, Jones murdered Frida's friend, 11-year-old Florence Little. He slit her throat and hid her in his parents' attic. When she was found, he confessed to both murders, saying he had a desire to kill. But because of his age, he cheated the hangman and was released after 20 years in prison and joined the army. He arrived back in Wales just 4 months before Muriel was murdered. However, there was no evidence to put Jones at the scene of the crime, and he died in 1971. In 2008, the case was once again reviewed by a cold case squad led by Detective Chief Inspector Paul Bethel, who managed to track down Muriel's blue coat, underwear and school uniform in a dark corner of a room in a rural police station. There was no doubt it was Muriel's, as it was labelled in copper plate. At the back of the coat at the bottom was a semen stain, no longer visible but circled by a yellow crayon. DCI Bethel sent the coat to a Dr. Colin Dark, who after 3 years was able to extract enough DNA to successfully create a Y-STR profile. This would enable the police to identify Muriel's murderer through the killer's relatives' DNA and to finally clear anyone who might be thought a suspect. Finally, to a relief after all these years, Hubert Hoyles was found not to match the DNA, and more significantly, the prime suspect for many years, Harold Jones, was also found not to be a match. So it was back to square one, it would seem. And the many experts who thought it was Jones now had to find themselves a new prime suspect. Just recently, a new true crime cold case series was released on BBC Wales called Dark Land: Hunting the Killers. A panel of experts, and I use this term loosely for at least one member of the panel, reopened the files of old murders. And surprisingly, they did come up with some interesting new information and asked some good questions. How come nobody heard the 2 gunshots, not even Muriel's mother, who last saw Muriel 400 to 500 yards from home? Now, there is a theory that she was covering for her husband John. Now, I certainly don't buy it, but he hadn't had his DNA taken, and up until the TV show it hadn't been checked against a sample. But they found a cousin of Muriel's who gave a sample, and they now await the results. Also, recently, a book belonging to Muriel called Little Playmates was found in a charity shop in Carmarthen. Muriel's name and a bookmark were found inside, stating her full name, Muriel Joan Drinkwater. Now, the panel made a bit of a thing about it maybe being in her school satchel when she was murdered, and the killer took it as a trophy. Why? Why wouldn't he take something smaller, like a sock or something small? Once again, I'm afraid I personally didn't buy that either. I'm sure Muriel had loads of belongings that found their way to car boot sales and charity shops, etc. in the years following her death. And the cousin saying, yes, he remembered the book. He was 6 years old when she died. No, sorry. They did, of course, though, come up with another suspect, which we knew they would. This time, it was Ronald Lewis Harries. He killed his adopted elderly relatives, John and Phoebe Harries, who he called auntie and uncle, with a hammer, then buried their bodies in a kale field on their farm outside St Clears, which is about 15 miles west of Carnarvon. It is thought the argument was about money. they had agreed to lend him to buy a car, an offer which for some reason they withdrew. Harris, I've got to add, was caught with some fantastic detective work by Scotland Yard detectives. They tied lengths of cotton all over the farm. Then they made it known to Harris that they were very near to locating the bodies. He panicked and went to see if they were still undiscovered. And hey ho, the broken threads led them to his aunt and uncle's graves. Harris was found guilty of the murders, sentenced to death and hanged at Swansea Prison on April the 28th, 1954. He was 24 years old. So why could this make him a suspect in Muriel's murder? Well, firstly, the severity of the murder of his aunt and uncle made the police think this wasn't his first murder, and indeed he is suspected of at least 2 others. And it is thought during the time of Muriel's murder, Harris had worked in farms in Petlegaya. Even it was said that he actually worked at John Drinkwater's farm. But I think that is very doubtful indeed, as he would definitely have been checked out. And in any case, a cousin of Harris stepped forward and gave her DNA, and it too, alongside John Drinkwater's cousin's DNA, is waiting to be tested. I hope it doesn't take as long as the last time. So will we ever see this 75-year-old case solved? I'm afraid to say that I doubt it. The only thing I can think that can solve it now is familial DNA. All the main suspects are dead, and I don't think it was John Drinkwater. We know it wasn't Hubert Hoyles and Harold Jones, and I'd be very surprised if it was Ronald Harris. So I think the Little Red Riding Hood murder, as it was called, I think only because it was in a wood, will sadly remain unsolved. I really hope I'm wrong. What do you think? I don't normally do unsolved cases, but Muriel's case, as well as the case of Royal Air Force woman Rita Ellis, who I hope to do an episode on soon, have always held a special interest for me. Anyway, that is the end of the story, and this is the bit where the sensible listeners turn me off and go to sleep. However, if you are what I now call a murder at bedtime masochist, you will be staying on to listen to my waffle. Firstly, I'd like to thank you so much for getting me to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. That was always my goal, and I'm amazed I got there, and I'm so grateful. I love the messages you send and always reply to all, so please drop me a line. As I've always said, Murder at Bedtime will never be monetised. No adverts, no sponsors, no buy me a coffee, no Patreon, no frills. Just me chatting into the camera to you, hoping you are there to listen. I appreciate your support so much. I see that a lot of you have had a look at my new project, which I've loosely titled Grave Peculiarities, where I was searching for the grave of Dr. Helen Davidson, who I did an episode on, and ended up searching for little Olivia Dahl, the children's author's young daughter. I really enjoyed doing it, and if you didn't get round to watching it, please give it a look, and also can you give it a thumbs up, because it really does help in sharing it around. I hope to do more in the future. I'm not sure yet whether I'll start a new channel for them or I'll just leave them on Murder at Bedtime. If anyone has a case they would like me to do in the future, please let me know. I've already had a couple of suggestions which I'm working on. I'd just like to put a shout out to Sean McNeely. This is a great guy who puts out a YouTube vlog on Lincolnshire folklore, legends, ghosts, mysteries, etc. And he's become a sort of my hero. Because as anyone knows me, I am a very proud yellow belly through and through. And this channel is awesome, and I'm going to ask him one day if probably we can do some sort of collaboration. So please check him out. Also, I'm very excited about something that me and the amazing Lindsay from Stolen From Me are planning together, and also the Cozy Crime Corner that myself, Lindsay and Debbie Q of the Right Shoe podcast have plans for. So, exciting times. Anyway, that's the waffle for this time. Please subscribe and like on YouTube, and please put that thumb there and rate and review on podcast, on all podcast platforms. It really does help. Sleep well, everybody, and see you next time. Take care.